Hello and Happy New Year. Welcome to the Life to the Full podcast. My name's Dav Morse and I am your host. My role is to share with you some things you might find helpful in making the most of your time here on Earth. I hope you go away from today's episode with an excitement about 2021. I'm going to share with you my end-of-year review process and how I'm setting goals for the coming year. 2020 has not been the year that many of us planned. But that doesn't mean to say that we don't make plans for the next year. So without any further ado, let's get into today's episode. And there we go. 2020. Am I right? Not many people predicted what was going to happen in 2020. This time last year, it was very few people that were thinking 2020 is going to be a massive, massive disruptor for the entirety of humanity. There were a few people that were saying, oh, there's this thing going on in China. It's not going to look good for the rest of the world. But almost nobody predicted it was going to be what we've had this year. This time last year, I was doing my annual review, setting my goals for 2020, getting pumped for the next decade. All the people that I was listening to at the time were saying, yeah, it's not just a new year, it's a new decade. The 2020s are going to be amazing. Make it your best decade yet. Just think about all you can achieve in a decade. And then 2.5 months in, a lot changes. But just because things didn't work out quite the way many of us expected, many of us have had difficult years. 2020 has been a rough time for a lot of people. But just because things haven't worked out the way that we originally thought they might this time last year, it doesn't mean that we can't look to the future with a sense of optimism and a sense of what am I going to achieve in 2021. I've only been doing it for a few years, but one of my favourite things to do in the week between Christmas and New Year is have a little annual review. A little process which I go through, which I look back on the year that's just gone and look forward to what I might like to get done in 2021. And I hope by sharing my experience and my process with you that if you are not really a goal setter, if you're not really a annual reviewer, that you might take a few minutes, just a morning, a couple of hours maybe, to reflect back on everything that you've been through in 2020, everything that you've learned, everything that you've achieved. So I usually start my review of the year early in the morning before the kids are awake, as part of my miracle morning routine. My normal routine changes slightly over the few days that I'm doing this review, but essentially it's the same. Get up, 6 a.m, put some tea on to brew, some pu'er and green tea mixed together, and sit down with a cup of tea, my leather-bound journal and a pen, and just have a think about what the last year's been. And I answer these 3 questions. I make notes, comments, thoughts, reflections on these 3 areas. Number 1, highlights of the year. What have been my highlights of 2020? Number 2, what are the lessons I've learned in 2020? And number 3, what are the challenges that I have faced? When it comes to the highlights, I usually like to do it in 3 stages. I start off thinking back from my memory, what were the best things that happened this year? What was good about 2020? And there's bound to be some good things. I found actually that my highlight list for 2020 was actually longer and more exciting than my highlight list for 2019. So I go through rack my brains thinking, what memories have I got of highlights that I've had this year? And after I've done that, made a few notes, I go through my Google Photos and I think, oh gosh, yeah, that happened this year. And I add them to the highlights list. And there's a big reason for doing this. One of the reasons is it's just so good to be thankful for what has been a difficult year. Be thankful for the good things. Be thankful for the highlights. In a world that focuses so much on the negatives, it is just a really wonderful thing to be focused on the positives, even if it's just for a short time. I make a point in my life to highlight the positives, focus on the positives, and push through any negatives and just focus on what was good. It makes me feel happy. A lot of my highlights from 2020 are kind of family-based. Despite all the restrictions through most of the year, there were times where we could get away. So my family and I went away for a week to Whitstable, and we got to meet up with old friends and friends that we hadn't seen for a long time, some of them friends that we've had for a really long time since our time at university, and it was just such a good time to just connect with those people. We had a week away in Pembrokeshire with the family as well. That was such a nice time to be able to just spend time with the people that you love. And if 2020 taught me anything, it's spending time with the people that I love is vitally important. I can hardly believe that it was actually in 2020 that I went on a trip to Senegal with a couple of the guys from the church to see what life is like out in Senegal for Christians, for churches, and to be part of a conference equipping missionaries in Africa to reach African people. And it was just such an exciting trip to be a part of, and I just can't believe that was this year. Then on a personal note, I've started a podcast, I've built a website, I've started a YouTube channel, all exciting things for me. I've had 2 super proud dad moments this year. I was so proud of my daughter, Poppy, who's 5 years old, who is a little bit shy to perform publicly. But she wanted to be in the Eisteddfod. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Eisteddfod is a competition, a festival. She competed in the Unawd Blwyddyn Dau a Iau, the solo for years 2 and below. She was only in reception, and she was able to get up on stage and sing. She was so nervous and she was so shy about it, but she still did it, and I was so proud of her for getting up on stage and giving it her absolute best. And then, of course, the most exciting highlight of 2020 out of everything is my second daughter was born. Little Owenna was born during lockdown. Pretty tough time having a baby during lockdown where only one parent can visit, especially when your baby is 2 months early. So we were in hospital for 3 weeks. Only one parent allowed at a time, so I'd go in one day and Rachel would go in another day. Rachel would come home in some tears because she wasn't going to go and see Owenna the next day. She just left her, and it was a really emotional time for everybody. And Poppy as well found it really difficult that her sister was born, the sister that she'd been waiting so long for, and she couldn't visit and she couldn't meet her new sister, and she had to wait 3 weeks for her to come home so she could finally meet her. And that moment when they first met was just an amazingly special dad moment. So 2020 had plenty of highlights. Second thing is lessons learned. I'd encourage you to think, what have you learnt in 2020? What are some of the things that you've come through that you couldn't do this time last year, or that you've made your way through, navigated problems? What are some of the lessons that you're going to take away with you into 2021 and beyond? Don't lose this opportunity to make your life better in the future by learning some of these lessons. And then the challenges. What are some of the challenges that you've faced? Some people have faced many, many challenges during 2020. And the great thing about facing challenges is when you come through stronger and more prepared and ready for the next challenge. So there we go, that's my review process. Look at the highlights, look at the lessons learned, and look at the challenges. And then I go about setting goals for 2021. Now, we've already seen that setting goals is just that. It's not guarantees for achieving anything, but it points you in the right direction. And if you're not pointing in the right direction, you could end up anywhere. If you want to know that you're on the right track, you need to know where you're going. You need to know what you're aiming for in life. So I have 8 categories for my goals, and I have 1 goal in each category. And I can split it down into the first next step of how I'm going to reach that goal, and then what actions can I take every day. I think I got this from a book called Goals by Brian Tracy. So the categories for setting goals for 2021 are a spiritual goal, a physical goal, a financial goal, a career goal, a family goal, a social goal, a personal development goal, and a positive impact on the world goal. If you can have 8 goals that you're working on, that you're coming back to, that you're spending time with, thinking on, meditating on, looking at, working towards, then you know that this time next year you're going to have a whole load of highlights to go in your highlights reel, and you're going to have a whole load of lessons that you've learned, and you're going to have overcome a whole load of challenges. So there we go. If that's helpful for you, I'd love to hear from you. I'm on Instagram, David Morse, and the Life to the Full podcast is also on Instagram. I'm also on YouTube, David Morse, where I share some of the financial side of these Life to the Full pillars. So there we go. It's not too late to set aside a little time with a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and a pen and a journal to spend time reviewing what has 2020 been like for you and what are you looking forward to for 2021. Without vision, the people perish. So without a vision for where you want to go in 2021, it's not likely to be all that it could be. Thank you once again for listening. If you did want to leave a review of the podcast in your app of choice, that would be wonderful. Much appreciated. I'd love to read them. Here's to a 2021 that is even better than 2020. Peace out.